Warning, some content shared in the following program is not appropriate for children.
Welcome to Just an Average Citizen, the podcast that helps to inform, educate, and empower you to make an impact in Abilene and the Big Country. Okay, and so here's where I'm at. I'm seeing this. I'm trying to have conversations with people I love about how dangerous this is, but all I keep hearing is, "Oh, we just need to let people be who they are and who they feel and how, and it's like, no, this is wrong. It is not normal. There's scientific stuff that's not making sense, and science is going out the window. And it's so interesting because this is all during COVID, where there was a lot of science going out the window, and people were thinking, oh, we just ignore what we've known for the last however many years, and we're just going to trust these people who are telling us, oh, trust us. This was in the summer when I realized I was reading this book and I was seeing some people in Abilene, or maybe the summer after, I was seeing people in Abilene who were coming together as parents and concerned citizens because a family had gone to the library and realized there was some really inappropriate material in the library that should not be around kids. And they went to the city council, and this book was thankfully taken off the shelf in Abilene. It's still on the shelf in Dias, but I've marked all the pages that I would never think to see these graphics in. Like, I've not seen these graphics before because I've avoided this stuff. And here it is being exposed to our children. This book is for 12 to 17-year-olds, young adults. And there should be a cover on it, and it's pictures, and it's like how to take pictures of yourself naked and send them to people. I mean, it is gross, and it points back to Planned Parenthood if you need more information. So this book was moved quickly. They were like, this book is inappropriate. We'll take it off the shelf. Great. So then we move forward, and notice that it wasn't going so well with the other books. The other books were causing a little bit more problem. And there was no way to take books off except to say one at a time, this book is bad, and it's a 4-month process. It's something that had never really happened before. So the parents were like, we got to come up with a better system in order to be able to get bad books off the shelf. And again, it's for children. We have to think of children differently than we think of anything else, because children are protected by their innocence. We protect them. We don't let them go to rated R movies. We don't let them listen to explicit music. We don't let them do drugs. We don't let them drink alcohol. I mean, maybe with parents, we definitely don't let them drive before a certain age. There's things we do to protect children. And so to protect children from being exposed to this poisonous, harmful material is important, but we didn't have a standard of how to do it. So sadly enough, there were a lot of books already on the shelf that were poison to our children and teaching them things that did not matter, or that were bad. Like, for example, this one. I don't know of any reason that a child should read a book about gang rape. This is, again, for 12 to 17-year-olds. Gang rape is never something that is cathartic. Reading about it, a fictionalized version. This book, I took my notes off of it, has the F word in there 181 times. It has violence. It has alcohol, drugs. All this stuff is not something we want our children to read. We don't want our children to read those books. And I say children because until they're adults, they're children. They're children. And mature content is something that we have. There's not our line has been fuzzied up and blurred the boundaries. Do you catch that? And so what happened was we returned from being overseas, and I was able to join in with the group trying to help protect our children, which, so we talked to the city council, and we tried to get them to reason with us. And instead they just said, nope, it's the parents' job. And we're just going to follow the laws of Texas, which say obscenity is not allowed unless it's educational. So if I, as a teacher, want to read this book to students in my class, I'm good to go. But if I take this book and read it outside class, so we walk outside the school and I say, hey guys, we didn't finish the book. You want to come finish reading it with me? If I did that, I could be arrested. Same book, same people, different purpose. That is insanity. That's madness. And that didn't work. We tried to get new people elected on city council because we knew that was really what needed to change is leadership. That didn't work. And so we really felt discouraged. And I was like, what is going on? What is going on that something that used to be offensive is now just normal. And it's okay. It's okay for kids to read about violence against children. It's okay for adults to read about violence against children. I mean, it just makes no sense what is going on. And it was a good thing that happened. It was a good thing that happened because then I would have never been forced to read this book, Stolen Honor, Stolen Innocence by Judith Reisman. She had another book about Kinsey and the sex trials or something. I can't remember what it's called, but this is her updated version. And what's so great is I have some slides from this book to show you. The first one, and I'm sorry, these are a little grainy just because, I was going to just read it to you, but I was able to find these in her original book, and that's so awesome. Alfred Kinsey was a man who was a scientist, and this part is going to be a little rough. So if you have kids around, it's going to be rough. Probably should have said it about the other part too, but I forget because I've been in this for so much. I'm a little numb to it, sadly. But we're going to be talking about some serious stuff here with Kinsey. Kinsey was a scientist who studied the reproduction of wasps. And he made this great hypothesis that, hey, maybe people are like wasps. They just reproduce. It's no big deal. And so he produced a book. He actually did research. So at Indiana University, he did lots of research and was able to produce some data in a book called Sexuality of the Human Male in 1948. And this is from some of these charts here I'm going to show you are from the book. And what's troubling most about it is not that he had an agenda to normalize sex. His hypothesis was children are sexual from birth. Okay. And so what I began to realize is if children are sexual from birth, then reading about this at 12 is not a big deal because they've been doing it, thinking about it, wanting it for their whole life. And so he did some studies. He did studies with married people and found that they were actually very content, and that would not fit into his hypothesis that children are sexual from birth. So he had to dismiss that data and only include the data of single people. And those single people not only include just your common everyday person, I guess, who is willing to talk about this in that time frame, which was really not normal, but also men who were imprisoned for rape and abuse to children. And he got them to give him his data. And then he got them, probably not the incarcerated ones because it was a little hard, but he got them to test on subjects as young as 5 months old to see if their bodies responded to touch like adults, because again, they're sexual since birth. He had a room up in the top of his house where he videotaped and photographed and documented all these things. He had university funding. He got funding from everywhere. It was disgusting how many children were violated because of him to get his data. But when he published his data, they found that there was really some troubling patterns. The numbers didn't match up. There were numbers that were included, but it wasn't adding up. And the last tidbit I will say is like when he did describe married people's physical contentment, he couldn't find real married people, so he would use people like prostitutes who lived in a home, sometimes with a woman. And if they lived long enough together, he would consider them a married couple. He wanted to defy God. He did not like that God said that he put limits on things and protection and boundaries around us. So he wanted to prove that God's way was not best and that we could have and be any kind of person we wanted to be. He enjoyed homosexuality. He enjoyed, lots of escapades. In fact, he died because of his vigorous sex life. It takes a toll on a body, and it wasn't meant to be lived that way. And so he died of complications of that. I don't really like talking about this, and I'm really glad I'm recording this. So maybe I can just say, watch this, because I'm really tired of talking about how horrible it is. Because I remember, I forgot to tell you, when I was working with the library books, I began to carry on this book, which some of you have seen, called My Porn Bag, because I wanted people to understand what these books were. And sadly, most people that I talked to were like, oh yeah, I've heard about the library stuff. People want to ban books. And I'm like, nope, this is not what it's about. And so I would bring books. My favorite story to tell Anyway, I'm sorry, I'll tell you that in a minute. But anytime I would show people what we're talking about, like foul is fair or let's talk about it, they were shocked and they were like, okay, now I understand. And I had no idea it was that bad. And it is that bad. And we've caught a lot of them, but unfortunately they're still sitting in the library, and that's troubling. But my favorite story to tell is The Handmaid's Tale. And this is like a holy grail of people who have a little bit different beliefs than I do, because they talk about how appropriate it is to describe me as a person who has religious faith. And it was after a debate, and the guy in the leading, he said, hey, go back and talk to Tammy about her books in her bag. And so all of a sudden I didn't hear it. All these people flooded up around me, and I was like, oh yeah. And they're like, tell me about the books. And I was like, okay. And I could tell they were really interested. And as soon as I started pointing out, and the guy goes, oh, Handmaid's Tale, that's a great book. We can't even talk about that. And then I showed him what's in here, because this is the graphic novel. And he was like, yeah, I don't know what to say about that. And then they couldn't. They had nothing to say, because the narrative is being pushed that we don't like the LGBTQ plus whatever group. It's that we are trying to suppress them. We're trying to marginalize them. We are hate speech. In fact, a lady said, don't let them talking more at the council because they have hate speech. And it's like, no, we're just talking about this stuff. And so, I've learned that just when doors close, don't be disparaged. God is in the move. God is moving, and we got to keep looking for how he's moving and what we can do. So now let's look at the screen here, and I'm going to try and keep going, because I know we're not even to the book yet. But I want you to understand all this foundational stuff. So I just want to let you know that this is a table that said, how were 317 to 1,746 children abused for Kinsey's study? 1,800 children abused just to get his data. This one we're not going to linger on much, but this is the one when in 1980, Judith Reisman, the lady who wrote this book, she was on Phil Donahue, and he was trying to dismiss her and talk about how she was just being a little over the top. And she goes, show table 34, show table 34. And there was no response for the people. They didn't know how to handle this, because we have children 5 months to 10 years who were tested physically to see how their body to respond to inappropriate touch. And for 24 hours, and these people, Kinsey was a pedophile himself. These people were pedophiles. They molested children, just to see. Now, I don't think it was just to see what they could learn, but that's what was allowed by our government and has been pushed. And I think that's what's so troubling, is we don't understand how impactful Alfred Kinsey's research has been. In fact, he's called the father of sex education, because he believes all children are sexual from birth. He believes that every child should be taught about it. So that's where we get a sex education in the schools. And it comes from a man who wants to sexualize children. He wants to groom them so that men can, because he doesn't think there's any problem with adult child sex. He doesn't have any problem with it. And I'll show you more of that in a minute. But, okay, so I want to show you this. What happened in 1948, he published the book, Human Sexuality of the Human Male, or Sexuality of the Human Male. And they discovered that there were these 55 laws, or 55 aspects of our common law, our law that are 52 sex crimes. That's what it was, for civil order. And they said, these are based on biblical values. I don't like God. I hate God. And God is going to be demolished. So we're going to use Kinsey's finding to undermine and destroy these laws, just because they were based in what the Bible said to be true. Oh yeah, here's the full page of it. Look at me. Sometimes I'm more efficient than I realized. Even more efficient there. I think one of the troubling stats about what happened when we started sexualizing children, or teaching them, if they're going to do it, we might as well teach them. Nothing happened. STDs did not go down. Pregnancy did not go down. In fact, everything got worse. So it was a very counterproductive approach. And a lady named Audrey Warner, who I was introduced to on Seth Gruber's Unaborted podcast. He did a 3-hour long extended podcast with Audrey Warner and Judith Reisman. Nope, not Judith Reisman. It was the other lady, and I can't think of her name right now, who wrote the Sika Circle, and her name left me. But that was where I started to understand more of these pieces. And Audrey Warner was a sex ed teacher, and she worked within the schools and the clinics, and she realized everything she was teaching was causing problems to be worse. And that's a great podcast to listen to. Okay, so we talked about that. I think this is it. Okay. Let me look here. Under the cover of the American Bar Association. Here we go. Then by 1950, under the cover of the American Bar Association and funded by Carnegie and Rockefeller grants, the tiny cadre of American Law Institute Model Penal Code authors did not clarify Americans' common law, but rather radically changed its sex laws based on Kinsey's data. Remember, it was unscientific. He has been debunked. There has been people who've said this is wrong, and there was a group that did it, and I don't know if I can't remember if it was the Rockefeller or the Carnegie. They paid money to shut it down. They've paid he has been shut. His errors, his fraudulentness has been hidden from the public for far too long, and it's amazing. And so it changed our common law, America's common law, to a model penal code. Okay, a model penal code has nothing grounded in the Bible. In fact, it cites Kinsey far more than any document should cite it. And we had common law up until Kinsey. And once Kinsey came onto the play, they were able to shift to model penal code, which is what has been adopted by all 50 states, one by one by one. We couldn't get it federally passed, but they could convince states one by one. And Texas, thankfully, was the last. But nonetheless, it still fell. Okay. This next one I think is interesting. Excuse me. Let me just find where it starts. America's founders crafted a civil society and its treatment of sex in the United States law based. Let me say that again. America's founders crafted a civil society and its treatment of sex in the United States law upon a faith base. What does it mean for law, justice, and public safety to document American governance built upon the 10 Commandments of the Old Testament, as well as any other New Testament laws which form the Christian faith? This was confirmed in Church of the Holy Trinity versus United States, 143 U.S. 457 in 1892. The U.S. Supreme Court unanimously agreed. These and many other matters which might be noticed add a volume of unofficial declarations to the mass of organic utterances that this is a Christian nation. The language was clear and unambiguous. This 1892 Supreme Court decision has never been overturned, that we are a Christian nation. It implies an adherence to laws largely based on fixed moral standards designed to encourage marriage fidelity and to strengthen the family. Man, strengthen the family. Who knew that that's what the law was for? Are our laws strengthening the family? Okay, so this is really troubling. This is really troubling to me. How could a man who's been dead for over 40 years have an impact in America today? Westlaw is the most widely used database for legal cases and law review journals. A preliminary search for the years 1982 through 2000 yielded more than 650 citations to Alfred Kinsey. You can find 650 citations of a man whose science was bad. For comparison, citations for the Framed Masters and Johnson sex research team during the same period turned up only 92 citations. The Kinsey list does not include the many additional cites to the American Law Institute and the Model Penal Code. Combining Kinsey's citations with those located via the Social Science Citations Index and the Science Citation Index yields at approximately 5,796 compared to about 3,796 for Masters and Johnson. He roughly doubled the citations for such luminaries as Sigmund Freud, Abraham Meadow, and Margaret Mead. Okay, so he is cited almost 6,000 times in science journals and things like that. So I'm just going to flip through this fastly because I think it's very visual. So this is what that looks like. Non-comprehensive Kinsey Westlaw cites. 1982, meaning the foundation of what they're saying is based on the fraudulent science or the unscientific methods that Kinsey used. You ready? Here we go. Keep going. Still going. There we go. That's a lot. That's a lot. His more than 6,000 citations in law, social science, and science journals attest to his considerable influence, but they do not indicate the extent to which his views have been further magnified by such key change agents as Ernst, Pascal, and a bunch of other names in the Rockefeller Foundation. For example, how Pascal uses a snippet of Kinsey's misleading data to call for a change in U.S. law regarding sex. So there's an example of that. I mean, what do you do with that? Okay, now this is also equally troubling because these unrealistic Bible requirements, these Bible-based laws, Kinsey had to overchange them. Okay. It was grounded in the fact that Kinsey said that 95% of American males are sex offenders, breaking one or more laws according to the common law standards. So you can't leave those around because we can't have 95% of American males in jail. Therefore, the American Law Institute wanted to eliminate the almost savage penalties which had discouraged crimes like adultery. I mean, what do you do with that, right? Okay, moving on. So, based on the widespread publicity, by 1955, the authors of the American Law Institute and the Model Penal Code cited Kinsey's new science to justify their call for eliminating long-standing American laws. At the top of the list was legalizing fornication, cohabitation, and adultery in most states. Okay? So, they were using Kinsey to justify changing the law. All right, this one is up here. So Bryce Christensen addressed some of the appealing social consequences from no-fault divorce. One of those has been often the draconian laws to collect child support from alleged deadbeat dads. The U.S. Census Bureau reported that in 1950, right around when Kinsey dropped his book, 43% of children were born or were at home with mom while dad worked full-time. By 1990, only 18% of American children had such a stable home. So Kinsey, he is one of those people that have changed history so much. I mean, Margaret Sanger and Alfred Kinsey are right up there. Margaret Sanger helped push birth control, and Alfred Kinsey said, you don't need to be in a family. Like, just live free. You're created. You're like an animal. And I find it interesting. Seth Gruber says that, the more animalistic we can become, or they make us, the easier we are to control. So the more of you think yourself with no boundaries, no discipline, no ability to live within boundaries God has established, it makes you easier to control. Would you sign up for that? I don't think so. Okay, let's keep going. I know this is a lot of information, but I feel like all of this has been impactful and helpful in looking at what we're dealing with. We're not just dealing with queer theory. We're not just dealing with postmodernism. We're dealing with Alfred Kinsey's destructive and poisonous ideology about sex and how everything about it. I mean, everything about it. I realized earlier this summer that I have been part of reproducing what Kinsey said to do. He said, tell your children, we got to call things by their body parts. I did that. And I feel horrible that I've been a part of it, but we didn't know. And so that's why I'm trying to get the word out. Like, just things like that. Like, just know what you're doing and why you're doing it. We don't want to keep doing the same thing because we don't know the roots of it. Okay. I think this is disgusting. Right here. Are we on page 234? Yes, we are here. Okay. So, although from 317 to 1,888 boys and almost 200 girls in a sample experienced sexual contact with adults, he claimed, experienced no trauma. Children with adults experienced no trauma. Kinsey observed, he said that contact with even relatives were often repeated because the children, not the adults, had more or less actively sought repetitions of their experiences. Children sought it. It wasn't the adults who wanted it. It was children. That's disgusting. Okay. This part says that Kinsey hid this child sex abuse data from the nation and the FBI. The Model Penal Code. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, the Model Penal Code. I don't know where this says it on this page, but it excludes incest and abuse. That's not a part of the model. It's part of common law because you're not supposed to abuse children, but in the Model Penal Code, it does not. Oh, yeah, here's where it says it normalizes. I don't know where it says this. I'm just going to read it. Normalizes adult child sex, pedophilia, and pornography. And if you don't believe me, I can show you a book that is a Planned Parenthood produced book that talks about how to have an adult-child consensual relationship. Consensual is another word that has blurred the boundaries for sure. Okay, we're almost done with this. Let's see here. Yes. Okay. So this is a little complicated, and I'm going to finish with it, and then your brain can explode. The common law, right here in the middle, we're going to talk about that criminalize and strictly punish those producing and purveying obscene materials. Black Law's Dictionary, 1968, include the historical pre-Kinsey definition of obscenity, which remained largely intact until 1957. So obscenity is offensive to chastity of mind or to modesty, expressing or presenting. You can see it's a really long one right here. It just talks about that, impure thoughts, lustful thoughts, corrupting the morals of youth or the standards of right and wrong. There's lots of that. It talks about the paper, and then it talks about obscenity right here. The character or quality of being obscene, conduct trending to corrupt the public morals by indecency or lewdness. Okay, and so that's what it used to be. And then Kinsey got into the role, and now, is this the right page? No. Yeah, that's interesting. All right, so Kinsey he's on the scene, and it changes to prurient interest. Well, prurient just means excessive interest in sex. And so instead of it being about what is done to the person, it's about the person pursuing it. If I don't have a prurient or an expressive interest, then it's not obscene. Where it used to be that whatever I expose somebody to, if it is defiling them, that's obscene. It's the standards have been wiped out. Okay, so he moved the boundaries. Yeah, that's on page 243. Let me get here. I'm sure those had something important on them, but I'm just going to move on here to he moved the boundaries. And I don't know where it says on the page because my brain is getting a little tired here because it is weary. It wears on me. And now that you have the foundation from these last episodes of postmodernism, queer theory, and you understand where we came with this obsession of sex and how it became our identity, I thought this was a really interesting timeline. They took out prayer in schools in 1954, and then they took out the Bible in, I believe, 1960. And when God's word was removed, and again, we know that up until the model penal code took place, it was common law, which was based on God's word. But when they took out God's word from the schools, they took out the ability for kids to walk in their identity and hear their identity and have their identity prayed over them. Then came the SICA circle, which is the Sex Information and Education Council of the United States. And so we took out the identity God gives and replaced it with identity that is given because of your sexual life. And I think we can all see the fallout of all these things combined and how they have made us in a really bad place where we are. And so thank you for listening to Just an Average Citizen podcast. I hope you've learned some tools that have helped inform and educate you on how you can make an impact in Abilene in the big country. And if you like what you're hearing and you want to share this with others, that'd be great. Make sure you go to justanaveragecitizen.com to find out which platform you can listen to. Then you can subscribe, and there's a way for you to support us to help us expand and do more to make a greater impact in Abilene and the big country with what we're trying to do. But I hope you will listen when the next ones come out, because I think you will find it's worth your wait, and it is worth helping understand what's going on in our city.